Well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in another partnership meeting. My name is Pedro Ronca. I'm currently managing Cocoa Action Brazil on behalf of WCF. I'm an agronomist, engineer agronomist with experience in both cocoa and coffee production. I am also a coffee grower and with a lot of experience on sustainability. So let's get into my presentation. Today we are talking about Brazil's cocoa recovery. I invite you for joining this journey into Brazil, overcoming challenges for a sustainable comeback. So let's take a look. As most of you know, Brazil is a huge powerhouse for agriculture. As you can see in your left here, we are first or number one or number two world ranking in production and exports in several crops that you can see listed here. And this is mostly due to the strong enabling environment that we have in our country. But it's not really existing in the cocoa sector, where we are seventh worst producers. We are in fact an importing country, quite a shame for us. We produce around 200,000 tons, and we do have the whole cocoa chain here inside the country: production, processing, chocolate industry, and a strong consuming market that could definitely grow, considering we have a low per capita consumption, but a huge overall consumption, considering the size of our population. So just a few examples to let you understand when we talk about the enabling environment that does exist in Brazil, but not necessarily in the cocoa sector. For example, here we have Senar. That's a very strong organization in Brazil for technical assistance. They have more than 170,000 growers in technical assistance in Brazil, and used to have only 300 in cocoa in 2018 when Cocoa Action started in Brazil, but now are going up to 3,000 next year, quite a significant increase. We also have, for example, the organization of the cooperatives in Brazil, a huge organization with more than 1,600 cooperatives and more than 1 million cooperative members. But in cocoa, we only have almost 10, 12 cooperatives. And that's also the reason why in Cocoa Action we are supporting and strengthening these cooperatives, capacity building, training on a business-oriented approach. Another good example for you to understand is our Plano Safra, that we call is our national credit for growers, available with very low interest rates for growers to access. We have around $50 billion available for growers annually. And but in cocoa, we were only getting in 2018 around $5 million. It's almost nothing compared to the total, but it's in fact growing. This year we are reaching around $8 million and expected to add more $6 million in the coming years. So just a glance also on some overall picture of Brazil, also to support my panelist colleagues that are here. Our production is mostly based in agroforest systems in both region of Bahia and Pará, that are the two most important regions. Half of our productions are in each of these states. So around 90% of Brazil's productions comes from Pará and Bahia, and the rest, 10% more or less around from Rondônia and Espírito Santo. And in both cases, the majority of the systems are agroforest systems. In Bahia, the famous Cabruca systems, very traditional, almost 300 years of story, and the agroforest systems in Pará. And our production being based in agroforest systems, of course, is a very important opportunity for us, because we can use cocoa as a driver of reforestation. Of course, cocoa is native from the Amazon, and you will hear much more about that with our colleague today, Adriano Venturielli. So we'll not go into the details, but good news is that as part of Cocoa Action strategies, we launched together with the government in Pará state, a normative instruction that cocoa growers can use agroforest systems of cocoa to restore their legal reserve that is part of our forest code. And we do also have a lot of available land, a lot of pasture lands not really used, that could be much more efficiently used to increase production without any need for deforestation. Let's take a look now at the cocoa sector development in Brazil. So before 2018, before Cocoa Action started, and Cocoa Action started exactly this year, and it's in its fourth year this year, 2021. So before we had a situation of frequent flights, no synergies, no motivation, no cooperation, in a very traditional negative spiral where the sector was not developing, really going down. A tremendous crisis for more than 3 decades. But now what we see and what we have been working hard to change this, building trust, integrating the actions, building partnerships, promoting cooperation, of course, to change this negative spiral into a positive spiral that we see that is moving now. And we also launched recently the project Cacao 2030, that's part of Cocoa Action strategy that I will share with you soon. So just for you also to understand when I talk about enabling environment, what I mean is basically technical assistance, grower organizations, efficient supply chains, access to credit, logistics, and strong private institutions. And this is also important to understand that results within farm gate, they really depend on the enabling environment that is in fact beyond farm gate. And that's the reason why we stress a lot on this enabling environment. We push it hard. And part of the strategy to build it in the cocoa sector and to bring it to the cocoa sector is by building the governance of Cocoa Action Brazil that we built in 2018, that has participants from the public sector, federal and state level, research entities, public extension services, the industry associations, our great partners, ABICAB and AIPC, and the private sector, 8 companies that you see here, all WCF members that started together Cocoa Action Brazil. Thank you for your all. And of course, we are always open for new members to join Cocoa Action Brazil. Let's take a look on what was happening in Brazil before on that example that I shared with a lot of crises. So basically, growers with low productivity, they could not invest, low income, no fertilization, low production, no technical assistance, no proper pruning, conflicts in the chain, lack of gaps, no cooperation. Growers do not invest, no soil correction, no access to credit, no investments, degradation of working conditions, productivity loss, low income, lack of trust, low motivation, and no investment. So the result of this negative spiral was definitely a failure in the long term that we faced for 30 years. And no enabling environment existing. But what we are organizing and structuring for our sustainable comeback in the country is exactly the positive spiral that I show now. So productivity increase first and very important, soil correction, access to credit, nutrition, technical assistance, higher productivity, good agricultural practices, growers reach profit, they are more motivated, they have resources to invest, they have higher productivity, they fertilize, they make partnerships, they have higher demands for inputs, a better management, a better working conditions, they invest, they build trust, they use technology, there is demand for technology, growers with income, they expand their areas, they become larger small growers, and there is the success in the long term, very dependent on the enabling environment. So let's take a look now at Brazil's growers profile, also for you to understand. Most of our growers are smallholders, around 70 to 80%, as you can see here in the screen. We have 93,000 growers on an area of 700,000 hectares of cocoa, what gives us an average size per farmer of 7 hectares. This is quite interesting because our small farmer is larger than the average area for the rest of the world. And we also tend to say that 5 hectares per family is usually possible to achieve economic viability of production, considering only cocoa production. We just launched it as part of Cocoa Action and in partnership with the partners that you can see in your right here, an economic feasibility study to show and to, in fact, to analyze the economic viability of 7 different scenarios for both Bahia and Pará. And the results are that 6 of them are economic viable, with average net income of around $1,000 to almost $3,000 per hectare per year, but this very dependent on productivity. So only happens if productivity is above 1,000 kilos per hectare. And the situation in Brazil is unfortunately very far from this. Productivity in Bahia, as you can see here, very low, extremely low. Productivity average for Brazil, and Pará, much higher productivity around here. As I said, economic viability from the study before around here. And from the technical side, not hard to get 1,000 kilos per hectare and low intensification. And of course, we can go up into this line, increasing technology, increasing intensification, but not necessarily getting up to here, because probably the economic viability, profitability, that very depends on the production system, but is usually around here, let's say. So just to share also some highlights, we don't have much time to share everything that is happening in Cocoa Action Brazil, but it's clear for us, and it's very happy to see that Cocoa Action became a reference for the cocoa sector in Brazil. We are all growing maturity here, including industry, including public sector, including all entities. We published several materials, including a very nice report from Instituto Floresta Viva. We also published guidelines to promote decent working conditions in partnership with ILO. We organize annually our Cocoa Annual Forum, hopefully next year in person again. And we also manage and coordinate several working groups to address specific issues on the bottlenecks of the cocoa sector here. These materials you can find all in WCF's webpage. And we are also working on our cocoa sustainability curriculum, an initiative that we have been working throughout this year, that is basically a set of best practices aligning Brazil's sustainability cocoa agenda. It was developed in a participative process with around 60 entities, quite a lot. And the idea is that this curriculum becomes a sustainability reference for institutions, for technicians, for projects aligned, and we will publish it end of this year, and it will be available also on WCF's webpage. Just a few words also to share with you all what is happening on our field level project that we call Cacao 2030 project, named as Structuring Actions for the Sustainable Development of the Chain in Brazil. It is a 4-year strategy focusing on the main producing countries of the states of Bahia, Pará, and Espírito Santo, focusing on technical assistance, training for technicians, strengthening cooperatives, unlocking credit. But I will not talk about credit because Karina will talk soon about this strategy. And we also have a promoting decent working component with Impacto, and another one on mapping both Bahia with Map Biomas and our great partnership with Adriano Venturielli that you will hear soon more details. And just for you to see how many partners are involved in this 4-year strategy, 25 funding and implementing partners from all the cocoa sector in Brazil. Very hard, but very good to put all these partners together. Just also a few words to share on CEPLAX. CEPLAX, very famous, our very famous cocoa entity in Brazil, that is now being under a restructuring and organization process. They're really focusing on research and technology. They are not doing technical assistance anymore. They have built a partnership with Embrapa, built a research entity that's also great, considering Embrapa's knowledge and scientific recognition around the world. And they also have a target with the Ministry of Agriculture to increase our production in 90,000 tons in the coming years, what is quite challenging, but we will definitely try to help to get there. And to conclude, last but not least, this very, and also as part of this positive spiral that is coming, we can see now several new projects. We mapped 17 starting in the coming years. Some of them already started, some of them starting next year. You can see how many logos here in the screen that are organizing and putting and implementing different projects in Brazil. By all these projects together, including our Cacao 2030, we have more than 100 million reais, $20 million being invested in the cocoa sector in the coming years. Of that, 12 million only on technical assistance. That's a huge gap for us in Brazil. And this will reach out to 8,000 producers. That's around 10% of our productions, but this could generate an indirect impact in the midterm on around 35% of our growers. So final message for you all, there are a lot of opportunities, of course, challenges also. I would like to thank a lot all the partners that have been with us throughout these years and in the years to come. Without them, we could not be evolving that much. Enabling environment is key, as I said, and it is present in Brazil, and this is a huge opportunity for us to bring it to the cocoa sector. The positive spiral is moving, as you saw, with concrete examples. It demands, of course, a high activation energy, but we are clearly overcoming the challenges and preparing and structuring the country for a sustainable comeback, very based on collective action and collaboration. That is key for the success of Brazil in the future. So if you want, and you are very welcome to join Cocoa Action Brazil, come to visit us, come to partner with us, come to contribute to this process that will harvest at the end a lot of the success stories and results for the benefit of the cocoa sector. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I will introduce our panelists. Let me put it here. So we have three important partners here with us. Thank you for joining. So first one, I will invite Karina Pimenta. She is a co-founder and currently executive director of Conexus and Conexus Investimentos Socioambientais. She's graduated in business at São Paulo School of Business Administration and in master degree in social development for the University of Success. Karina works with topics related to impact finance, climate change, and forest conservation, social entrepreneurship, community business, and sustainability rural development. Karina is a great partner of Cocoa Action, of the project Cacao 2030 that I said, and that this is also the reason she's together with us. Thank you, Karina.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, all panelists. Eu tenho que falar em português agora, né? Então, olá a todos e todas. Não sei se eu preciso dar um tempo para a tradução, mas vou usar o português aqui, que todos os painelistas vão falar nessa mesma língua. Eu queria primeiro começar agradecendo pela oportunidade de falar nesse painel sobre uma dessas estratégias que o Pedro mencionou, que estão criando um ambiente de negócio favorável ao crescimento da cadeia do cacau como um todo no Brasil, né? Acho que esse esforço coletivo mostra a diversidade de atores que a gente precisa ter implementando ações em conjunto. Eu vou trazer especificamente o ângulo do trabalho com o crédito rural. Uma das ações que nós, da Conexus, temos nos debruçado bastante sobre estratégias para alavancar o que o Pedro começou mostrando, o volume de crédito subsidiado no Brasil, né, um dos maiores do mundo, em termos de política de crédito agrícola, e que ainda não teve o mesmo efeito na cadeia do cacau que a gente vê em outras cadeias do agronegócio no Brasil, né. Aqui eu trouxe alguns números mais detalhados, talvez, para a gente olhar um pouco para o uso do crédito rural na cadeia do cacau no Brasil, né. Vocês podem ver que, em geral, o uso do crédito rural tem crescido, mas em volumes ainda muito baixos para o tamanho da indústria e para o tamanho da política, né? A gente tem evoluído de mais ou menos 15 milhões de dólares, duplicou em 2 anos para mais ou menos 30 milhões de dólares. Isso aqui falando de smallholders, falando de grandes e médios produtores, né, todas as políticas. Dá para perceber que grande parte do impulso para uso do crédito, né, tem vindo dos smallholders, dos pequenos produtores, o que mostra, né, que o trabalho que está sendo feito, né, de motivar os produtores a melhorarem, renovarem suas plantações, introduzirem mais sistemas agroflorestais, tem começado a surtir um efeito e uma demanda maior de crédito, mas ela ainda é muito baixa em relação ao tamanho mesmo da indústria do cacau no Brasil, né? Então, hoje, se você olha o tamanho da produção, ela representa 0,6% da produção no agronegócio brasileiro, mas 0,06% em termos de uso do crédito rural, né? E é aqui um pouco que a gente tem se debruçado, não só em construir estratégias para acessar esse crédito, mas também para atrair um conjunto de parceiros do campo do investimento de impacto, dos investimentos climáticos, que olham para essas cadeias, para esses sistemas florestais como uma grande oportunidade de regeneração e reflorestamento ligado às metas de clima que o Brasil assumiu, né, perante os demais países no âmbito da COP Clima, olhando como que a gente constrói um arranjo que, para além de mobilizar o crédito, use ele de uma forma a alavancar também o gargalo da assistência técnica, para que a gente não gere uma onda, né, de acesso a crédito que não se converta em produtividade, em melhora, né, da renda do produtor e com capacidade para que ele possa repagar esse crédito. O Brasil tem um histórico de muita inadimplência no passado com as políticas de crédito rural, e a preocupação é de como você estrutura um sistema, obviamente, viável para que esse seja um indutor importante da economia, né. Aqui eu vou focar um pouco na parte dos pequenos produtores, que representam hoje 80% do conjunto de produtores no Brasil e 50% da área plantada, né? Então, uma parte bastante importante. São eles que estão com uma baixa produtividade e que poderiam se beneficiar mais e mais do uso do crédito subsidiado. E por quê? Né? Mostrando o tamanho da política, então hoje a gente tem mais ou menos para a agricultura familiar no Brasil, anualmente, 8 bilhões de dólares disponível, e ainda muito pouco utilizado, tanto pelas cadeias de produção sustentáveis como um todo, né, onde a gente insere o cacau, e muito menos pela indústria do cacau, que é 0,1% que ela captura desse valor, né? E por que é tão importante falar do crédito rural versus outras formas que vêm crescendo de acesso a crédito, a financiamento para os produtores, né? Primeiro, porque o crédito subsidiado no Brasil, como vocês podem ver, acessíveis para o formato de um pequeno produtor, né, entre 3% e 4,5% ao ano. Enquanto as taxas de mercado que o produtor poderia acessar para fazer o mesmo tipo de atividade de custeio custam 3, 4 vezes mais, no mínimo, E, na média, os pequenos produtores não tomam crédito de outras formas. Se eles não acessam essa política, eles não tomam. E aí entra aquele ciclo da espiral negativa um pouco que o Pedro mencionou. Eles começam a não investir, não renovar o pomar, e aí você tem um ciclo de baixa produtividade se consolidando na cadeia. Né?
Consolidating in the chain. If this is such an important policy, with interest rates below the basic prime rates for the economy and making capital assessment, why has it not been more widely used? So these are the barriers we want to break. First, the financial system needs to be closer to the reality of the small farmers. We need to work with the financial agents and the small producers. Very few have an established relationship with the banks. The bank, it becomes harder for the bank to take that risk. The policies are being made, like Pedro said, giving priority to the cocoa chain in Bahia, in Pará. There are state government policies, commitment from different agencies, and that mobilizes the financial agents operating in this field. There are public banks in Brazil. In Amazonas is Banco da Amazônia in the Bahia region. Very important region is Banco do Nordeste and Banco do Brasil, the two banks. And then we have this approximation. We also have the bottleneck of the producers not being prepared for credit, documentation, their land tenure, documents not organized. The technical assistance is fundamental in this process. Working with the producers to get all their things in order, the documents, the steps that need to be taken is very important. We have been learning a lot how to financially include the producers. We have been working a lot on this. And also the structure that we have with processors and chocolate companies working. We have many possibilities for the buying companies in the de-risking strategy as a whole. Let me explain a little bit. Basically, we have very few small producers with access to PRONAF, the policy for credit. 400 producers. We have 75,000 producers. Others that are not accessing rural credit, like we see in other more organized chains. Usually it's much more, and the cocoa is far from the potential. And then the size of the investments. How much could be captured from this policy to move this chain better? And then the working capital of the crop. We would need $180 million of the policy just to move the small producers. And then more than double to the investment portion. You can see here it's growing in volume, close to $9 million, and the per capita volume per contract very low also. They are investing, it shows, but in a very low way comparing to the capacity to reach a virtuous cycle that we want. So how to assemble a strategy that can mobilize the capital? What we have been using is mobilizing the public banks to be part of this arrangement, involving the ESG investors, like we call them, that are very interested in this agenda of climate and forest, carbon sequestration, chances of regeneration and reforestation, all this linked to carbon practices, sustainable use of the land, and they see opportunities to invest in cocoa production and investments that can be reimbursable. We do have a mechanism for that, indirect financing, with guarantees for the organizations to access rural credit. And then venture philanthropists also. These are philanthropies willing to take the risk, who want results in the financial system, of course, and they have been using other kinds of capital to help unlock credit for rural properties. These resources convert into direct loans to cooperatives that are at the base, organizing the groups of producers and converting into technical assistance work and also encouraging rural credit with a network of credit activators. They go to the cooperatives, to the groups, to the producers, doing this work of technical assistance and helping the cycle. This platform works very well not only for cocoa chain, but also other chains like açaí and other agroforest systems in Brazil. So how have we been doing this in this partnership, like Pedro says? With Connection Brazil, for the creation of this environment that we want. So this is something that needs to align with what we want.
Destravamento do crédito rural junto com o Banco da Amazônia, que é o banco público responsável pela operacionalização da política na Amazônia.
So to unlock the credit, Bank of Amazonia grants the credit, we become agents of the bank using a system, and this is the first time we implement payment per results. Conexas assembles the network, introduces the programs, we get a service fee, but the most significant part of the resources that gives sustainability to the model comes from the credit programs to avoid the default. This is a risk model that we have been using to involve the cocoa cooperatives where so many of the small producers are, and build with them a technical assistance model based on credit. So identify, train, and hire these enablers, sometimes through the cooperative. The cooperative usually in Brazil doesn't have this know-how, but we build this network around the cooperatives. Many of them end up hiring and passing on the system. So we train them and they become part of Conexas. They can operate now with Banco da Amazônia. So they do the technical assistance with the producers, they do the financial education programs, planning, not only cocoa but other crops, and other activities they might have in their land, and credit projects and following up on the crop. It's a way to teach the producer to use credit in his or her favor. So we introduce the investment on this first stage of financial literacy, let's put it this way, for the producer. So we have the projects with the credit agents delivered by Conexus to the bank. The producer has access to the credit, and when he repays, the bank pays Conexus, and Conexus pays the chain. The funds that will keep this network of technical assistance alive. And we want also to improve the sustainability of the production. And for the system to work, the partnership with WCF has been fundamental, because for the system to start in the first few years, we need seed investment. so that we can wait for the payment per result. The financial support, therefore, with Cocoa Asset is very important in this strategy, and others Pedro talked about, for the bringing up this capital. And this year we have started already this network of work. We have 3 cooperatives in Amazonia doing this exact work, 13 technicians doing this credit, and we have 650 producers involved drafting credit projects, thinking about the harvest for next year. We have contracts already effective with the bank, and the expectation is for the first year. In April, the expectation is $2 million already obtained for access to rural credit, meaning a doubling of the figures we had last year for the whole year, not talking about Amazon only. So it's a basic example and system, the partnerships we have been establishing, and the ability to multiply 5, 10 times the access to these resources. Why is this so important? The productivity, when we double and triple it, it's a technical assistance help. Be there with them, with the harvest management. There is no other way to do it. We need to ensure this local technical assistance. So this is the model in Amazonia.
Also at Conexus, we have been funding cocoa co-ops, because this system is right now focused on co-ops, or actually growers, but co-ops also struggle when it comes to having access to credit. We have direct loans, and we also have initiatives to offer bigger credit for rural initiatives. We have a different model for Bahia because the Amazon Bank is not operating there, it's a different biome. And the conditions that we offer through the Amazon Bank are not present in Bahia. That is why we have a different system for Bahia. So with Banco do Brasil, a nationwide bank, and by the way, a bank which usually structures initiatives with different companies, they then offer different funding options. So we've seen that we can increase rural credit in Bahia, and we can bring these processing companies to this equation. We can establish sales agreements for growers here. We've also been using the Conexus Fund, an impact mechanism, as the collateral for these transactions, which is mandatory for these transactions to go through. This has been our strategy. We have a small pilot, and we believe we're going to keep on using this strategy for upcoming years. We're also using the same model for technical assistance. Now, does this solve our problem? Well, what I can tell you is that this is a part of fostering an enabling environment. And this is important, but credit alone is not going to solve the problems that we have. It is a big driver, though. However, businesses, co-ops, and technical assistance providers need to combine their efforts so that these resources are well invested. This applies to cocoa production and income generation for small growers because they just want this activity to be more profitable than other activities that they may be performing right now, like basic farming or livestock raising. This is what we want in the long term. Thank you.
Karina. Thank you for the presentation. Let's go into the next two presenters, and then we'll have a session of questions and answers at the end. So now I would like to introduce Adriano Venturieri. He is an agronomist, great partner of us also, master in remote sensing and PhD in geography, researcher at Embrapa Amazonia Oriental, East Amazon, since 1993. He's an expert in territorial analysis, working on the following topics: territorial planning, land use, remote sensing, Amazon landscape dynamics. He has very interesting data to share with us. Thank you, Adriano, for the partnership, and thank you for being here with us today. You are on mute, Tato. Yes. Tá mudo, Adriano.
You're on mute, Adriano. Maybe at the top?
Okay, Pedro. Obrigado pela apresentação.
Yes, sorry. Thank you for the kind introduction, Pedro, and thank you for having me. I'll be sharing preliminary results with you, but these results are important. These results are related to the expansion of cocoa in the state of Pará. As Pedro was saying, I am an agronomist, but since I joined Embrapa, I've been working on land use planning. So I'm not an expert on cocoa per se, but I work with land planning and mapping in the Amazon region with remote sensing. So here we have a summary. We're going to talk about what this project is, Map Cacau, our method, our results, and our conclusions. We're going to publish an article regarding this work, and it will be published soon. It is now under review. Our main challenge with the cocoa supply chain, with the Map Cacau project, was to have spatial identification of cocoa farming in the state of Pará. Pará is indeed a big grower, but we don't know exactly where crops are. We don't have spatial maps showing us where these crops are located. So this was a big challenge for us. We did our work on the state of Pará. It is the second biggest state in Brazil with 1.2 million square kilometers. It is in the Amazon region, and this is a challenge because cocoa comes from the Amazon region, so we could see it all over the region, and this makes our work harder. Now, let me start off by saying that when you work with imaging or remote sensing, it is quote unquote easy to map palm oil because you have a specific pattern. You know, you have big pieces of land. There's a certain shape for these trees, so in satellite imaging, it is way easier to find these patterns and shapes. So we have been working on the expansion of palm oil trees in Pará, and because of their shape, our work is a little bit easier. However, it is very hard to map out cocoa plants or cocoa trees, mainly because we have different production systems. And when we look at imaging from remote sensors, our lives become a little bit harder. In the past, we didn't have good resolution. Right now, we have better resolution, but our work is still hard, as you will see. Here we can see a polygon, and you can see that in one land, there are different models of cocoa trees. We have cocoa with acai, we have cocoa with pepper, we have cocoa with coconuts, we have cocoa with trees. We have different versions within the same plot, so it isn't easy to identify it, even with high-res imaging. So this is a challenge. How can we understand this so that we can have automatic mapping? When we look at a Landsat satellite, we can't really tell everything that is here because it is confusing. It gets confused with secondary trees. So we see one single pattern as if the whole region was the same, but when we look into details, we see significant differences. These are a few examples of what we see in our field work. As I was saying, we have different models. Cocoa is grown through different models. We have areas that are forests, we have areas with secondary regeneration or recovery, we have areas that have been through other types of farming, and we have cocoa in all of these images that I'm showing to you. It may not seem like it, but it's there. And this makes it difficult for us to identify these crops through satellite imaging. So even with high-res imaging, we need a lot of different models for mapping. This is a model that is becoming more popular in the state of Pará. You have cocoa and you have açaí trees. So as Pedro was saying, we have a number of agroforestry systems that are now gaining momentum. In our work, over 90% of the areas we see are usually like this one. It is very, very unusual for us to see cocoa crops that are planted alone, that do not have other crops around them. In basically every area we've seen agroforestry systems. Look at this one. Here we have a cocoa crop, but we have an African tree system as well. And it's really hard to see what is beneath it. That is why it is increasingly harder to have automated mapping using only algorithms to process images. These are some of the examples of why we struggle a bit. So when we created this project and we submitted it to the state of Pará through FundCacau, we were trying to tackle these problems. So this project is called Map Cacau. We wanted to work on digital imaging and imaging processing. As time went by, we saw that we wouldn't be able to use our regular methods for this kind of mapping. It would be completely unfeasible. That is why we had to adapt and change our work process, our method. And that is why we developed what we call a participatory image classification method. Let me tell you what we do. We take a lot of images into the field. We talk to different technicians and growers, and we go over these images that have been printed out. And growers and technicians come to these meetings to recognize these areas that come from satellite imaging. Now, these growers know these lands really well, so they are able to identify and pinpoint where people are growing cocoa, not only in their land, but also in their neighboring growers. In the Trans-Amazon region, Uruara region, and many other regions, we were able to do this, even the Luxembourg region. What we wanted to do was to collect data and to verify the data that we had with these growers. Of course, we also presented the project to them. And then we went to the field to check these areas. Because, of course, even growers were telling us that those areas on the map were cocoa crops, we had to go to the field to check it. We got to really interesting results. By 2019, or basically by the beginning of the pandemic, we had mapped around 70,000 hectares in Pará through this kind of participatory mapping or collaborative mapping. So it's basically 70,000 hectares that have been mapped since then. It's also interesting to notice that 99.54% of the areas that we mapped do not have any kind of conflict with protected areas in the Amazon region. And these 0.46% are likely in conservation areas, but in this case, these conservation areas allow for farming activity, in this case, cocoa. So in basically 100% of our work, we didn't find the problem of cocoa crops in areas that are fully protected. And as I was saying, we haven't mapped everything out, and it's really hard for us to state hard numbers. But out of those 70,000, this is what we were able to get. We also work with the demarcation of land in the state of Pará. And since we have this information, we did a few interesting analyses. Number one, on the size of properties. We saw that plots for cocoa are smaller than plots for other crops. And as Pedro was saying, with cocoa growing, we usually have family farming. We have smaller plots, smaller farms run by families. It's also important to see that places with cocoa present less deforestation than farms without cocoa. And we don't want to offer you a diagnosis of why there's less deforestation, but our guess is that since this is family farming, and since these families rely on cocoa for this livelihood, they work harder on cocoa crops, and their livelihood comes from cocoa, so they don't feel the need to promote deforestation as much. What is also interesting is that out of the 70,000 hectares that we mapped, 75% of the planted areas that we mapped until 2019 had already been deforested in 2008. So these areas had been deforested before. We didn't see deforestation because of cocoa crops. 75% of them had already been subject to deforestation by 2008, which is the year of our forestry code. Another big important piece of information is a comparison between Embrapa data and INPE data and our cocoa data. Through these projects, they map data from the Amazon. And we saw that usually we have new cocoa crops on degraded pasture land. So with the data from 2011, 2012, and 2013, we see that we use a lot of pasture land to grow new cocoa. So this goes to show that these damaged pasture lands are now being used for cocoa expansion. Now, I don't usually like to use a starting date and an end date for our analysis because we want to tell a story. We may say, well, from 2004 onwards or from 2008 onwards, because when we look at a timeline, it's interesting to see our evolution, and we can understand how we got to the 70,000 hectares. Basically, 30% of what we map as cocoa is still mapped by the INPE project as forest. So these areas were never categorized as deforested areas. This means that these areas were not included as deforested land. And it's very likely that growers used this land that had been deforested before to introduce cocoa crops to it. And even though INPE says these areas are forests, when we went to the field, we actually saw that we have cocoa crops there. Now, 20.6% of these areas are mapped as secondary vegetation. And we hadn't been able to split primary forests from secondary vegetation. With dendê, açaí, and coffee, because of how mapping works, these are usually categorized as secondary vegetation. And in the areas we mapped, 20% of these lands are called by INPE as secondary vegetation, but it's actually cocoa crops. This means that with these primary forests and secondary vegetations, cocoa is related to vegetation maintenance and the protection of land and the protection of water resources and all of these systems. It's important to have this information. And as I was saying, basically 36% of cocoa expansion happened on pasture land in the Amazon.
So that we were able to generate. When we look at the current mapping and looking back in the past, we see a significant reduction in the use of fires. Why? The areas when they were pasture land, it is usual to use the fires to clean the pasture land. With the introduction of cocoa and the forest systems, there is a reduction in that. The cocoa, when we talk about the emission of greenhouse gases, sequestration of carbon from the atmosphere, and also the ecosystem work. We believe strongly that expanding cocoa in Pará and the Amazon in general will bring a big benefit not only to the producers, but of course to the preservation of the environment. The region has been considering like a region of depredation of the system, but we see, yes, a possibility for sustainability that is very significant. That's what I had to present to all of you. I will be here for any questions. Thank you so much, Pedro.
Obrigado, Adriano. Thank you, Adriano. Thank you for sharing such interesting information. Let's move on now to our last panelist before we get into the questions and answers session. So now I would like to introduce you to Adriana. She's a biologist with masters in genetics and molecular biology and doctor and PhD in microorganism biotechnology. Adriana has deep knowledge and expertise in post-harvest technology, physical-chemical sensorial analysis of cocoa and chocolate, and production of artisanal chocolate. She works with research, extension, and innovation projects in those areas. Currently, she's the quality manager of the Cocoa Innovation Center, SIC, our great partner also from Cocoa Action in Ilhéus, Bahia, where she works supporting groups of cocoa growers to improve the quality of the final product and to assess specialty markets. So welcome, Adriana, happy to have you here also. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Pedro. Quero agradecer ao convite e falar pouquinho sobre
Thank you so much for this introduction. I have this passion for cocoa in Brazil. Let me talk a little bit about our origin, our specialties, and this is my participation. Greetings to all. Special greetings to the women in cocoa and chocolate in Brazil. Let's contextualize. We are many countries in one in Brazil. We have so many origins, each region, each people doing this work in a different regional way. We are looking towards origin certifications that may be able to embrace all our differences. There are many in Brazil. We will talk, of course, about southern Bahia and the cocoa from Linhares in Espírito Santo. The origin certifications. In the case of Bahia, we can show the traceability, all the field work, all the way to the consumer. We have a blockchain platform. We can show the entire history of the production from Cabruca to the quality process. We can show every step all the way to a chocolate bar in the hands of the consumer. Like Adriano said, like Pedro said, we have a production line with a lot of potential geared to sustainability. The idea is to use this highly environmental relevant environments. We're talking also about the Atlantic forest, not only the Amazon. We have significant threats, but our focus is to show that we can produce sustainable cocoa, protecting the environment, our most important asset. The producers are very much focused in aggregating, adding value for the quality. This is what I want to focus on. We are exploring our genetic diversity. Brazil today has a huge genetic potential. We have international awards, domestic awards, and we are getting deeper into these genetics. We are working also on technological innovations, mechanization. We have been shining in this area of much innovation in the field. Production, cleaning, different types of woods and other non-conventional products in order to substitute the wood in the production. Many others discovering new things in our genetics, applications too that help us in the technology. So all this is helping us to map our production much better. So the origins of the cocoa, like I said, are very specific and very distant one from the other. We have a history, we have a rich complexity in flavor in each one of the cocoa producing states. If I talk about the cocoa from Pará, for example, it's the fresh fruit aromas, sweetened, more smooth, and also with spices that are so different from the cocoa of Bahia. It is as good as the Pará cocoa, but these are more brown and walnut and
E assim,
woody flavors
então nós
that
temos
are
uma
very different.
diversidade que também é
So,
expressa no nosso
showing
produto.
that we have a rich diversity
Estamos
expressed
focados
in
no
the
mercado, é um
flavors.
mercado
Our
que,
focus
como o próprio Pedro
is
mostrou, é um mercado interno muito
the
interessante.
internal
O Brasil é
market.
quinto
Like
maior
Pedro
consumidor de
said,
chocolate e
we
a
are the
gente pode dizer que tudo
fifth
que a gente produz
largest
de
consumer
cacau é
of
uma
chocolate in
exceção.
the world,
Nós
and we
temos um
consume
cacau
what we
orgânico
produce.
que ele se
We
tornou
have
um produto muito
organic
associado aos
cocoa,
pequenos produtores
very
rurais e
much
à
linked to the
cooperativa
small
e associações,
producers,
tanto da Bahia quanto do Pará.
cooperatives, and
E temos uma forma
associations of
marcada também
producers,
no cacau
Bahia and
orgânico.
Pará.
Também estamos focados cada vez mais no
We
segmento
are
de mercado de
also
qualidade e
increasingly
com marcas
focused
muito
on the high
promissoras que
quality
destacamos
market,
como o case da
very
Bahia Chocolate,
promising
que trabalha a qualidade,
brands
a padronização e a
working
consistência dos
on
lotes,
quality, standardization,
valorizam
and
o produtor e
consistency,
premiam os produtos de
valuing the
qualidade.
producer
Então,
and
é muito
awarding the
inovador
best
no Brasil,
producers. This is
porque
very
nós
innovative in
podemos dizer
Brazil
que
still.
agora sim nós temos
We
realmente
can,
um
yes,
pagamento
say
reconhecido pela
now
qualidade do cacau do
that
Brasil.
the quality is
E isso
awarded in
vem
Brazil.
estimulando toda a cadeia,
This has
né?
been
Então,
encouraging the
o mercado de
entire
chocolate
chain.
vem trazendo essa
The
consistência,
chocolate
essa
market has been
padronização
bringing this
para o chocolate.
consistency and
Então, nós temos marcas de
standardization
grande
to
destaque,
the
tanto
chocolate.
pequenas
We have
como grandes, que estão
important
levando a
brands, both
história, né,
small
os conceitos do
and
produtor,
big,
das origens, para as
bringing
barras de
these
chocolate,
new
saindo
concepts
na frente,
to
estimulando
the
a
chocolate
sustentabilidade.
bars,
No mercado interno no
awarding the
Brasil, hoje
quality.
nós temos
The
mais de
domestic
60
market
marcas
in Brazil, we
internacionais
have over
e elas só
200
crescem. E
brands,
cada uma
and this
buscando
is
origens
growing every
novas,
day. Each
conceitos
brand
novos,
looking for new
trazendo para a barra de
origins,
chocolate
new
toda essa
concepts,
explosão, todo esse
and
potencial
bringing
que
this
está dentro da nossa região.
explosion to
Em
the
relação ao cacau
chocolate
fino, o
bar
Brasil vem se destacando
in Brazil.
por conta da união da
Brazilian
cadeia. Nós
cocoa
estamos vivendo um cenário muito favorável e hoje a
is
gente
now in
tem
a
duas
very
multinacionais de
favorable
chocolate que é
scenario.
liderada por
We have an
duas chocolate.
annual
E a gente
prize,
tem a participação de
Seplac
toda
and
a cadeia de
Sifi.
cacau do Brasil.
We
E hoje nós estamos
award
conseguindo
the
mapear
entire
quem são
chain,
as
and
joias
we
do
are
cacau
able now
brasileiro
to
e
map
poder
the
apoiar o
jewels
produtor
of Brazilian
continuar
cocoa,
produzindo qualidade, a
so we
aumentar
can
a
continue
produção
to
de qualidade
support
para
the
poder
producer
investir em produtividade.
better and
E com isso
increasing
nós tivemos
investments
resultados
in
muito interessantes
productivity.
e em
This
2019
competition, the results were very interesting.
as 50
2019,
melhores amostras do
we
mundo,
ranked the
né,
50
com duas amostras no
best
Pará e
samples
uma na
in the
Bahia,
world.
e
We
esse
had two
ano estamos
samples.
aguardando
It was
ansiosamente
very
o resultado do
successful,
COEX,
and
porque
we
nós temos
can't
3 amostras
wait
finalistas,
COEX this year because
que
we have
também são
three
amostras que falam
finalist
muito sobre a nossa
samples.
diversidade.
These samples
Aqui é só um pouquinho do nosso
demonstrate our
potencial de sabor, né,
diversity,
resultado do
the
último concurso, onde
potential
a
of
gente
the
mostra muito sobre esse cacau do Brasil,
flavor.
onde a gente
This
tem das
shows
notas frutadas,
the
as notas de
strength
cacau com
of the new
alto valor em
fruits,
atributos, né, e todo
high
esse
value in
potencial que existe
attributes,
dentro, interno para
and
cacau.
the entire
Esses
domestic
produtos,
potential for
eles
high
não são
quality.
só focados em qualidade. É importante
It is
dizer
not
que
only
nós estamos muito
quality
focados na
featured in these
sustentabilidade. Não
competitions,
basta o produtor ter
sustainability is
conhecimento,
also a
ele não
big
basta
factor.
ter notas altas
The
apenas pela qualidade
producer
sensorial do seu
can
produto.
have high
Ele precisa
grades
mostrar
in
a
one aspect, but he or
sustentabilidade.
she
Então,
needs to
como
show that he
produtor, nós
produces
visamos
with
esse tipo de
sustainability. Like
categoria
Pedro
para
said,
fazer uma
we have the
triagem dentro
sustainability
das amostras finalistas e
curriculum
é premiado tanto
working with the
produtores que
finalist
possuem
samples, and the
qualidade, mas
awards
que
go
também
to
produzem com
quality,
sustentabilidade. Porque
but
aqui o Brasil
also
entende o
with
que é qualidade.
sustainability. Brazil understands
E
quality
falar um pouco do Centro
with
de
the
Inovação do Cacau,
sustainability
né, que é
factor.
uma
Now,
iniciativa
some
desde
innovation
2016, uma
from
grande rede, né, que
2016.
trabalha
We
conjuntamente.
created a big
Nós temos
network,
um
all
laboratório
working
de análise
together. We
físico-química
have
e
a
sensorial do cacau
physical,
de
chemical,
chocolate, mas na
sensorial
verdade nós temos
lab
um
for
grande
the
banco de dados
research,
sobre
and
qualidade do
we are
cacau.
also a huge
Temos
data
3
bank
linhas de
for
atuação:
cocoa
a
quality. We
qualificação,
work in three
onde nós
fronts:
treinamos produtores e
qualification, we
auxiliamos o produtor
train
na
the
melhoria
producers, we
contínua lote a
help
lote, né?
lot
Nós
by
temos a
lot,
parte
helping
de
producers.
plano
Then
estratégico, onde nós
we
ligamos
have strategic training, linking the producer to the use, and we build that bridge between the producer and the marketplace. And helping the producers to directly benefit. Our data bank can deliver a lot of content. We have the lab with all the analysis. So when we take care of the quality and when the quality market is really open to award the best, we can take it to the entire country. With the samples, we have the data allowing us to build tools to raise the standard of quality, to take the best possible decisions during the harvest, and be able to locate the quality producer, the profile of quality, and the volume of the product that he or she can produce. Our platforms help in all of that. This is for you to understand that there are other analyses we are involved with. So we go deeper and deeper about the quality of cocoa in Brazil. Heavy metals, toxins, volatile compounds, carotenoids. We do all these analyses and integrate the results to each producer's profile. This is what happened in 2019 at CIC. I can show you the profile of the samples that come in from premium to regular and the production volume going through. So I have a higher volume of regular. You see the percentages here. All this under analysis at CIC. And I have the premium that is absorbed by the marketplace with higher quality criteria. And we have the green one also with its percentages, the certified. So we wouldn't be able to arrive at this point without our partners. I think what is strongest at CIC is the network. We want to expand this work with partnership. We are several organizations and entities. We are very proud of it. We are focused on valuing the quality of the cocoa in Brazil and lot by lot helping producers to improve. It is very rewarding work, especially at this time of so many promises and partnership for cocoa in Brazil. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Adriana. Excellent. Very good to see. I invite you all, once you are in Brazil, to visit SIC. It's very nice to visit. I always recommend a lot. Let's see the questions we have here. So one question, and you please could place your questions on the chat. First question, what can we do to stimulate better yields in Bahia, given its rich story, but one of the worst yields in the world? Well, excellent question. It's definitely a challenge. I can make some comments, but I will also ask the others if they want to add anything. Gerard, well, first, I think it's important to understand that Bahia has several difficulties on the productivity side. First, due to the crisis, a very long process of low management of the Cabruca that created a lot of intensity of shade, too much shade that decreases a lot productivity. So one challenge is decreasing the shade, and of course this does have an impact on environmental side, because it's not easy to manage the shade on the Atlantic forest, a biome very important for Brazil and for the world. So another reason is the low density of trees. It's even for being very old plantations, also considering low investments for several years, and also considering drought, terrible drought Bahia suffered in 2017, especially in 18, generated a lot of losses of trees. And this decreased the density of trees, and it's needed replanting also to reach higher productivities. But there is also very interesting experiments going on in the Cabruca to show the best way for the growers to recover its productivity. There are several ways depending on the situation of the grower. Another challenge is definitely credit access, that in Bahia is even harder than in Pará due to the debt, and also due to the, as Karina explained, to the Banco do Brasil situation that has not the same conditions as the Banco do Amazônia. So I would say it's a complex environment, Gerard, but definitely we are working together, as Adriana said, each one contributing the way we can. Of course, quality, it's a way, and it's showing that it's a way to recover, but I will let Adriana speak about that because she knows more than I, how quality is also improving, giving the growers the opportunity to improve productivity by having more income, because quality is definitely higher the speed for transformation comparing to productivity. Productivity takes longer to reach results. So anything to add, Adriana or Karina or anyone? All good? Karina?
All good. I think all good. You explained well.
Okay, so let's see next question here. What is the current situation with the phytosanitary issues Brazil had in the recent past? By Ricardo Romero. Well, not sure if you're referring to witch's broom, I guess so, or to Monilha. That are two threats, let's say. First, regarding witch's broom, that was the main reason for the huge crisis Bahia entered and Brazil entered after 89 or 90s, the beginning of the 90s. Witch's broom entered and created a huge crisis. But today, producing with the presence of witch's broom is not an issue. Growers, the most technified growers can handle it. Of course, it needs investments that sometimes is lacking, and this is one of the struggles, but it's definitely possible to achieve good productivities even with the witch's broom present by working with genetics, with management, with pruning, and all the practices. So it's not an issue. We can produce cocoa with high productivity in Bahia, considering the presence of the witch's broom. Monilha is another thing. It's a new thing. It's not spread in Brazil. It was recognized in one spot in the very north of Brazil, in the Acre state, but not really spread to the production state so far. Of course, it will be a challenge if it gets spread, but MAPA, our Ministry of Agriculture, is working very hard to avoid that it disseminates for the rest of the regions in Brazil. So today, no Monilha in the main producing regions of Brazil, and able to manage witch's broom. I guess Anything, Adriana?
Dizer que realmente, após a introdução da vassoura de bruxa, nós tivemos...
Yes, I wanted to say that after Witch's Broom, we started working more on generic breeding. And genetic breeding also gave us the opportunity to use a lot of genetic material which foster quality. So this is also something very positive. With consistent work from research groups to control Witch's Broom, we actually had great opportunities when it comes to quality.
Okay, sorry, but unfortunately time is over. We need to conclude. I would like to thank a lot Adriana, Karina, Adriano Venturieri, our great partners. Thank you for joining. Thank you for making this great session. We got very good feedback here. And we are all up to chat more in other moments. Please reach out to us. Thank you.